This channel is made possible by viewers like you. My viewers, subscribers, and patrons greatly help to keep this channel going. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for all of you. Please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any uploads. And if you'd like to go the extra mile, please check out my Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you'll get access to what I'm working on, previews of upcoming content, and even early videos, along with other tier options for those that are interested. Thank you, and now on to the video. Looking back on the PS1, there's a lot of interesting titles that came from Sony trying to find their own set of characters. When you think of Nintendo, a certain cast would appear in your head, but with the PlayStation being so new at the time, who would those characters be? Ones that you would only find on the PlayStation. Thinking back on it now, we probably think of Crash and Spyro as being two of the biggest ones for the time. But this period when Sony was trying to figure that out, especially with their internal teams, there were a lot of interesting games that came from it, and one of those titles was Blasto, a third-person shooting action platformer with a healthy dose of humor. Phil Hartman voiced the character, and he shined and elevated the entire experience. Sadly, Blasto is a title that never saw a sequel, and Sony has mostly kept it hidden away. Join me as we take a look back at Blasto. The PlayStation was released in 1994, and they were hungry to have characters and games that someone could point to that only could be found on the PlayStation. In 1995, work began on an internal game called Blasto. The team wanted to have the look of a cartoon, with fluid animation and a healthy dose of humor. Blasto would take place in the future, where he is the protector of the galaxy. His nemesis is plotting to destroy the Earth, and it's up to Blasto to save the day. Blasto would be a parody of 1930s superhero characters like Flash Gordon, and inspired by Duck Dodgers. The team wanted a superhero-like character who was overly confident in their ability, to the point of it being ridiculous. The in-game levels would be more like larger freeform stages, rather than the traditional linear format at the time. For example, if the player wanted to go back to a prior area within a stage, they could do so freely and were often encouraged based on the objectives. In addition, when the player was in a stage, there would be no additional loading, so when you were playing, nothing would stop the player. Sound was really important to the entire experience. Chuck Dowd was the composer on the project, and he would later go on to be the composer for the Siphon Filter series. For Blasto, he created a dynamic soundtrack that would pivot and change depending on what the player was doing and transition accordingly. For example, exploring would be very different from engaging in a firefight. So while making the musical score, Chuck needs to consider each of the different gameplay situations that would occur. The goal of this adaptive process to the soundtrack would help to create a more immersive experience. Now, our space hero needed a voice, and the team quickly landed on comedian Phil Hartman. This was one of the easier decisions, as everyone on the Blasto team wanted Phil to be Blasto. Sony reached out to Phil, a contract was made, and Blasto's voice was now secured. When it came to the several one-liners that Blasto would throw out, the team's writers threw around a lot of ideas, and then an Emmy Award winner helped to come in to get those lines even better. The team cited Phil as being able to take lines that they honestly didn't even think work that well, and then he was able to turn them into really funny comedic lines through his delivery. Phil could just talk and everyone would start laughing. Phil was really interested in doing the game because his son at the time was very much into PlayStation games. All of the Blasto lines were done in an 8-hour day.
I'm back, but this time I brought a friend with me. Let me introduce you to Mr. Fission Blaster. Hot damn, I'm good. If this doesn't kill you, I'm yours on a sesame bun.
Since Blasto was going to have a bunch of humor, the team toyed around with a few ideas for having a more mature option for the game for their adult audience. Essentially, an additional memory card could be purchased to unlock more profanity and harsher jokes, and you would need this memory card for the player to get more adult Blasto experience. This interesting idea would mean that the player or the parent could opt to make this separate purchase and change the Blasto experience. As the development of Blasto took place, this idea was later dropped, along with having a version of the character who used too much harsh profanity. The developers felt that it would honestly not fit their character on what they wanted Blasto to be. Blasto would have plenty of humorous vocabulary for himself. The development team faced their set of challenges finishing Blasto and getting it out the door. The developers cited one of the biggest challenges was being that this time in gaming, with the transitioning from 2D to 3D for home consoles, was very difficult. The 3D was an entirely new medium for many developers at this time. For example, new problems would pop up for 3D that were not issues in 2D. To add on to this, Blasto had members of their team who were new to making games. This inexperienced team needed to get creative and learn effectively to work together to make this game a reality. And if that wasn't enough, Blasto was getting a lot of outside pressure. Sony wanted an internally developed mascot. Management wanted to point to a character or set of characters that you could only find on PlayStation. As the developers put it, the spotlight was on them to deliver, and as a result, flexibility on the project became less and less. The team stated that in hindsight, levels should have been cut that were forced in, and elements that should have been expanded upon were not. There was a swamp level that was mostly complete, which never made it into the final game, along with a secret level. Blasto's development even saw one of its developers sadly unexpectedly pass away, and this was devastating for the team. The team saw finishing Blasto as a way for doing it for their colleague they sadly lost, though this wouldn't be the only loss the team would be hit by. Blasto was going to be shown off at E3, and it was then that the news of Phil Hartman's death broke. This would even affect the launch of the game. As a result, Sony decided to quietly release Blasto. Blasto initially had a huge marketing push to go with it because it was going to be this big mascot, but after Phil's death, the marketing was pretty much dropped to not have the appearance that Sony was trying to capitalize on his death. Blasto was a game that faced a lot of behind-the-scenes challenges, including the death of a developer and Phil Hartman. While the team was inexperienced at the start, this project more than showed how they could really come together and finish the game and deliver what they set out to do. This wasn't the ideal development for any game, but it showed that each member of the team really brought something special to the table to ensure the completion of Blasto. In 1998, Blasto was released to the world. Blasto is a third-person action platformer. You'll spend most of your time shooting everything you come across, along with trying to make as many successful jumps as possible. This game is really tough, and much of that comes down from the large amount of flaws that it has. It honestly felt like a game that beat me with its issues that I ran into. At the same time, I did have fun with it, and it does have a lot of charm, humor, and heart. Pretty much every time Blasto opens his mouth, you'll at least smile, and some of his one-liners are really funny. Blasto is an interesting piece of Sony history.
Wait, didn't I ditch you back on Pluto? Hey, honey, you need a little help there? Looks like you've got yourself in a bit of trouble there. Now you just hang in there, babe, and I'll be right back.
Let's start out with the basics. As Blasto, you can jump, shoot, charge your shot for more damage, manually aim for more precision, but you need to stay stationary while doing this. Oftentimes, when near an edge, you'll automatically grab onto it. There's a few objects you can push around as well, along with activating switches. For most of the shooting, you'll be relying on the auto aim. It is decent, but could be a bit tighter. For defense, the sidestep is your best option. You do have a 180 backflip, but this can be a bit dangerous to do near an edge. When it comes to the gun sounds, they're really good and have some nice impact. The guns sound like cliched sci-fi laser weapons that you would expect to hear, and I mean this in a good way. When it comes to the impact to your charge shot, you can blow off an enemy's head with other weapons along with completely vaporizing them. I was surprised by what this title was able to get away with, especially with it being a teen-rated title. And another nice touch is how everyone is very expressive and vocal when they're hit. Whether it's the enemies or Blasto himself, they're all very expressive.
You hunk.
I'm a laser-toting love magnet. Oops, that's gonna leave a stain. Ow. Oh, mama. Oh, mama. Oh, mama.
As for your arsenal, you have a few options. Your main blaster will never run out of ammo, but all of the additional weapons have a limited supply. You'll find everything from a rocket gun to a flamethrower, along with some other useful pickups like a cloak and invulnerability. Some of your weapons even have an additional firing option, like how the rockets can lock onto enemies. There is another weapon that you get early on that seems like a troll gun at first, because it spawns enemies in who attack you. This is later used in a useful way, and while it was annoying to experience this the first time, it's kind of fun funny how some of this is implemented in as a bit of humor, with even Blasto reacting to it the same way as the player. There's a nice amount of enemy variety too, from several different types of gunmen along with floating enemies and flying foes. Now Blasto is pretty much equal parts third-person shooter as it is platformer. To the game's credit, it does provide a good amount of variety when it comes to the platforming situations. You'll have moving platforms, ones that make you bounce, ones that will even disappear, spinning tunnels that you need to figure out how to navigate through, and a lot more. When it comes to the objectives, Blasto keeps it simple. Shoot everything, land your jumps, rescue the babes for more lives and ammo, and find the exit. You can view all of the babes you have rescued in the Babe Viewer, and it has some of the best lines from Hartman here as well.
Well, hello there. Say, you're swell. Bambi, good heavens! You can't wear that in this neighborhood! Let me see if I can help you there, little lady. Now I've seen two masterpieces of suspension, the Golden Gate Bridge and that bra.
I want to praise the first level. It's the right length, acts as a good introduction to the experience too. Gives you exposure to the general idea of what you're going to be up against. So as something to get you hooked into the game, it's pretty good. One thing I think is not done well here is how the first level sets a nice pace, whereas the second level feels like you're kicked right into the deep end, along with it being 3 times the length of the first level. There are plenty of longer levels within Blasto, and I think it is impressive the space you're able to play within, especially considering that when you die, you respawn right where you are. But I would make the argument that the smaller, more focused levels are where things work a bit better. For example, these longer stages could easily be made into 2 or 3 levels, but I will get into this more soon. Now, you really can't talk about this game without praising the work done by Phil Hartman. The visuals and silly writing are done to contribute to the game's charm and heart, but what I found that really brings it all together is Phil Hartman, especially bringing that soul to the project. He was a comedian that whenever he showed up, he would always make it better, whatever it was, and for Blasto, he brings that special charm and brand of humorous delivery with him. Some of the writing may not be the funniest at times, but his delivery is always what sells the humor. It's juvenile, silly, and even a bit absurdist, but most of all, it's always funny. Blasto does embody many elements that I do enjoy about this period of gaming, even down to some of the figuring it out type of stuff, along with some of the brutal difficulty giving off that feeling of playing an older Genesis or NES title, and getting that satisfaction from succeeding. But Blasto is sadly a product from its troubled development. There's a lot here to enjoy, which is why I'm conflicted on this game as a whole. I have many issues with it, but it's also something that I wish was given a chance to iron it out and refine the game further, because there's a lot here to like, and you can honestly see what they were trying to go with. I do appreciate that Blasto does provide you with a map. My problem with it is that it's pretty much useless. I look at the map screens and I have no idea what I'm supposed to be gathering from this. This feels like a late game addition, or at least one that never received any feedback during playtesting. I have no idea what the developers were thinking I would gain from this. A map is used to provide the player with aid, not to confuse them. The sidestep is very important to your survival, and in many cases the game will prevent you from falling off an area with the sidestep, but in the heat of combat you can easily just walk right off as you're trying to manage everything. Something else I find annoying was how picking up a new weapon would replace your old one. The game does not let you cycle weapons. It is nice that you can change your camera angle too if you want, but the second option is completely useless. I could see maybe using this for something like a photo mode, but that wasn't something that was used at the time. The cloak is pretty good, but at the same time I did have a situation where I was getting shot at while cloaked. Maybe it was a glitch. Some pickups seem to be deceptive to put you in a position to have to die. Some enemies will spawn in already shooting at you, meaning you'll probably take a hit, but this feels cheap because you had no time to react to this action, unless you've already played the level. Blasto likes to have situations where enemies spawn in behind you, to the point that it is predictable, but it feels like a cheap way to chip away at the player's health. For a game where half of it is platforming, the jumping really needed to be more refined. It is really easy to overshoot your jumps, resulting in you dying. Along with this, moving platform parts are very frustrating. Now, with this being a platformer, there are traps you need to dodge. One of the worst ones are the fire traps. Their patterns are hard to read, and in most cases they just instantly kill you. I thought that maybe the game wanted you to jump on top of the trap to get past them, but this also resulted in me dying. Now, as I mentioned before, I had an issue with the pacing and length of level 1 compared to the next few levels. For example, level 1 will probably take you about 20 minutes, whereas level 2 could easily take you over an hour to complete. This feels far too long, to the point that it's a slog near the end of it. Level 2 could have been chopped up into a few more focused levels, and this probably would have helped the pacing a lot. Along with this, as a visual look at the map from level 1 then compared to level 2, you can kind of see the difference in size. You don't really get much information from this because the maps are useless, but you can see the size difference. In addition, level 2 doesn't really feel like level 2. It feels like what a later game level would be. The shift from level 1 to level 2 is steep. My point with many of these flaws, from the inconsistent jumping and plenty of the cheapness found in the entire game, is that this stuff really wore me down as I was trying to complete it. I was enjoying the good bits, but the further I tried to go, it felt like another roadblock would come up right in front of me, and it eventually got to the point where I needed to throw in the towel on this one. I couldn't beat it, and this is why I'm conflicted on this title, because I was really enjoying it and liked many things about it, but then there would be something that would pop up that would very much hurt the experience. Before we move to the conclusion, I have to praise the soundtrack. Chuck Dowd did a fantastic job here, providing great sounding tracks, along with how dynamic they are within each level, along with the different variations of the level's theme. Here are a few tracks from the game.
Central to Captain Blasto. Space Command Central to Captain Blasto, over.
Blasto here.
You have an urgent message from Admiral Big Shot on your main viewer.
Urgent, huh? Put him through, Command Central.
Blasto, Uranus is in big trouble.
What did I do this time?
This is no time for jokes. It seems that evil alien tyrant Bosk is up to his old tricks again.
Bosk? I thought that pear-headed psychopath was banished to the 5th dimension.
He was, but now he's back, and he's mad. The very foundation of the free planetary system may be at stake. His forces are already massed for an invasion of the planet Uranus.
And you want me to take it back, eh?
Can you do it, Blasto?
Is a frog's butt watertight?
I knew we could count on you, Blasto. Good luck, and remember, Uranus is on the line.
So what else is new?
Because of all the issues that Blasto has, and if you're a jaded person, this is an easy game to label as bad. But when I play a game, I'm actively trying to find the good bits, and Blasto does have those. The third-person shooting is fun, the weapons are fun to use. When the platforming isn't trying to rain on your day, it's also fun. The one-liners and humor are a great asset to the game. I really like the cartoony look, and I love the soundtrack. But on the flip side, there are a lot of issues. Blasto is honestly a game I think could have benefited from a proper remaster. If the original code is available, a good team could refine much of the mechanics here. When playing this, I could see what the developers were trying to do. I think they needed more time with it, and probably a better development environment. Sony doesn't really seem interested in Blasto anymore, and I think this is an important part of their history, and it is something that they should be proud of in a way. There's a lot of charm and humor to this title, and it comes from a time where they were trying to find their own icons that would represent PlayStation. Now, do I recommend this game? That is hard to say. It is a game that has a lot of issues, and I would say that it's at least worth a try, especially for Phil Hartman, because he's great. Have you played Blasto? If so, let me know your thoughts on it down below. If you're interested in being notified of new videos, please hit the subscribe button and bell. And if you would like to support the channel and get early access to content, please check out my Patreon. All of the links will be at the end of this video and within the description. And thank you very much for watching.